Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. My name is James Hicks. I'm with Hughes Commercial Real Estate. We're a small brokerage and development shop focusing on industrial. And I celebrated my 2-year anniversary in the business last month. So what we're talking about today is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, as I've spent the majority of the last 2 years knocking on doors, cold calling folks, sending emails to folks who don't want them, and things of that nature. So as Kate said, when we had our ACBR brainstorming session for the Education Committee back in February, I thought this would be a great topic to not only benefit our younger members who might be in my shoes or a little earlier on in their journey, but also the more seasoned veterans who might be looking for something that could either jumpstart their prospecting if they're feeling they're getting stale, or just a way to further develop their business. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I started about 2 years ago, and when I first met with my boss and my mentor, Tommy Hughes, he told me this business is simple, but it's not easy, and he's extremely correct in that fact. And what he means by that is that what we do on a daily basis, we sell and lease real estate. That's fairly simple, right? But how we get there is not easy, and a lot of times that takes a long time and a lot of effort. And so he refers to it as blocking and tackling, prospecting, that is. So he says, our business is a business that is lumpy when it comes to income. It's a lot of peaks and a lot of valleys, but there's a way to prevent that and a way to make your income steady and ever increasing, and that is to continuously prospect, continuously get in front of people, and manage your time in a way that allows you to do deals, execute for your clients, and do the best job to service them, so that those are long-term relationships that bring other relationships, while also continue to prospect while you're in the middle of those deals. So I think prospecting is one of the more unique parts of our business. It's one that you can't really learn in school. You kind of have to learn by doing it, and I think that's interesting. I think that there are totally 100 different ways to do it as well. I personally am a person who prefers to do it in person. I'm not very good on the phone, but I love to get in front of people, talk to them, learn their story, and so I like that there's a bunch of different ways to do it, and these guys are going to touch a little more on that. I'll hand it over to them as they know a lot more than I know and might ever know. But with that, Connor Winkler is our first panelist. He's been in the business about 6 years and has done a great job over at Lee & Associates, owning the west side of Atlanta. And then John Gosnell will be our second panelist. He's a principal of Strategic Real Estate Partners and has done a great job really covering up the entire city from an industrial standpoint, both on the landlord and the tenant side. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Doug Smith is Director of Leasing and Senior Vice President at Seefried, and he has, if not one of the most prolific landlord listing portfolios in industrial in the city. And so looking forward to hearing each of their perspectives on how they got started and now what they're doing to continue to grow their business as they've gained success. So Connor, you can take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, James. So Connor Winkler with Lee & Associates. I actually started out at an environmental engineering company called AMEG Foster Wheeler. My background in college was forestry and geology, so I tried to directly apply my studies to my career, and that worked out very poorly for me. I maybe spent 1.5 years there and realized that phase 1s and phase 2s in groundwater sampling, soil sampling was not for me. So I guess how I got started in the business was literally driving around the city calling signs. I wasn't even calling the head brokers. I was calling agents, trying to get meetings with them, which eventually led to speaking with the president or CEO of a brokerage. After probably 6 to 8 months of networking and having coffees and lunches, I finally landed with Lee & Associates with a guy named Trip Ackerman, who agreed to take me under his wing and show me the business. I spent probably the first 6 months just watching him do deals, listening to him cold call, trying to absorb everything I could. Finally, it was time for me to pick a market and specialize. At the time, a lot of the brokers at Lee & Associates had already picked a market. So there was the Northwest, North Central, Northeast, Fulton Industrial, I-20 East, and the South Side. All but Fulton Industrial, I-20 West had been worked. So I decided to go out there. At the time, rents were probably $3 a foot, and buildings were selling for 18 to 30 bucks a foot. It was not exactly where everybody wanted to be. So I felt like there was an opportunity to go out there and get some transaction volume and learn the business. Fortunately, it worked because the market gained a lot of momentum since I started. So I kind of had a year or two to get my feet wet, get some reps under my belt, and then the market took off. So I think timing had a lot to do with my success, fortunately. But in terms of prospecting and getting a book of business, like James said, I think it was a lot better in person for me. I would literally drive each and every street, knock on the doors, collect business cards, and in the process, backing up, the whole point was to get a meeting. How could I meet with a decision maker that could influence a sale or a leasing decision? And by doing that, I met a lot of decision makers just by door knocking and having the chance to then come to the door. And then if I didn't, I would go back, do some research, figure out who the guy was, and either send an email, follow up with a call, leave a voicemail, or write a handwritten letter. So I did that for every single tenant and owner user in the market above 10,000 feet. Then I think so that's kind of how I built the tenant rep practice. And then for the landlord side, that happened a lot more naturally for me because I was selling a bunch of buildings to the investment community. And then as those tenants phased out of those spaces, I would get the listing on it. So I think that helped a lot in terms of building the landlord rep practice. James wanted me to share a war story. There was one group I called on that was at about 50,000 feet, and they told me they needed 150 to 200,000 feet to purchase. So Tripp and I took them out over a 2-day stretch and showed them 15 or 16 buildings. We finally found one in McDonough. We put it under contract. Money went hard. We're 3 or 4 days away from closing. It's right before Christmas, my first year in the business. $6 or $7 million sale. It was going to make my year. And we got a horrible call that said something fell through with their SBA loan and they weren't going to be able to close on the deal. They forfeited $250-something thousand. It was a horrible end of the year, but I think you just have to have grit and perseverance. We kept working with these guys somehow, and a full year later, they ended up buying a $9 million building in Morrow, and we finally did the deal and got paid. So that was the deal, I think, that probably made my career in terms of wanting to stay in brokerage. I was pretty close to wanting to be done after that experience. But I'm not very good at holding a job. I was not a very good employee, and I had to somehow figure out how to make it in the brokerage business. So I think it's just persistence, grit, and the determination to win.
Cool.
Pass it on.
Here we go. I'm John Gosnell. I'm at Strategic Real Estate Partners with these guys right here, sitting up front here. And I guess my start in the business, just kind of getting going, is kind of an unorthodox one. I actually interned with this guy right here, Adam Thomas, over at Newburger Handy's. I was actually planning on going to law school while I was in college. I think that was my path, and I really was focused on that. That was something I had always wanted to do since I was a kid. And one summer, I think it was the summer going into junior year, I really didn't have anything going on for the summer. And I just was reaching out to people who were older than me that I knew through whatever means. And Adam went to church with me growing up. And so I had reached out to Adam and just said, hey, I know you do commercial real estate. Is there any way that I could shadow you for the summer or kind of do anything? And he said yes, and come on. And so I was at Newburger Andy's, which was a it was really a Class C industrial shop, and we went out there, and it was some of the tougher products in Atlanta. And some of you guys might know it, some of you guys might not, for the industrial guys, but it's small bay, 14 clear, probably some of the oldest product in the city. We were doing in-house leasing for that, and Adam kind of had the idea of, hey, we can go out cold calling and do this stuff and trying to build our own business outside of that. And I just fell in love with kind of going out, trying to talk to people. You're really playing investigative journalist is how I always compare cold calling to. You're trying to find out who the right guy is, how do I get in that door, how do I get past the front desk. You got to literally turn it into a game. And so that game I just fell in love with, and we were just doing it every day, and it was fun. And so got out of school, ended up going over, did a little bit with Newburger, and then ended up going over to La Vista. So maybe La Vista guys in here. We got one right, yeah, a couple guys right there. Awesome. So I was working with Tom Davenport and with Don Perry. And Don Perry was still there, CEO. He gave me a book called Fanatical Prospecting. It's by Jeb Blunt. Everyone should get it. And that's kind of just my Bible day to day. And so in that book, it talks about how you have these things called golden hours, right? And so golden hours are where when you're cold calling, you have these prospects who are in their office, wherever that may be, whatever asset class that might be, that they're in the office ready to be cold called. That's kind of how you got to look at them. And you don't, during those golden hours, you don't need to be doing emails. You don't need to be doing this or that or the other. You need to be trying to chase them, getting in front of them, because they're only in there for a certain limited period of time. So my advice on that front is try to limit that in tours, and those things are going to come up along the way, and it's really just kind of a standard to hold yourself to more than a reality. The reality is sometimes you're going to have to do some other things during the day to service existing clients, but that's really kind of what I built my book of business around, is trying to keep that standard and hold that as kind of the holy grail of prospecting, cold calling, door knocking, getting in front of all these groups. The other one that kind of fires me up every day is that this guy is out in the market every day in the same sub-market as me. This guy's a wolf. We play this 20th West Market. This guy is too. Mason Marsteller sitting up front. I mean, we kind of clobber each other up out in that west side of Atlanta, starting out especially. I'd walk in a lot of spaces, and it's always one of these two guys were right there in front of me with a card sitting on the decision maker's desk. So it was, that's really what would get you up in the morning, is the competition and the spirit of that, more than anything else. So I think at the end of the day, with prospecting, cold calling, I think it's really just kind of a reps thing. It's swinging the bat. It's going back to that door where the guy was rude to you the first time, but you kind of go in there with a smile and your chin up, and those sometimes will shake loose. A decision maker leaves the company for another opportunity. You never know what you're going to run into the next time. Don't get discouraged if things go south in the first call or the second call, third call. Go back for the fourth time, and I've probably had 4 or 5 of those that turned into deals because I went back and just kind of braved it. But you have to obviously sit in the car at first and sweat it out before you go into the door. That's just kind of part of it. But, go in there, do it. If it's a fourth, cuss out, get out of my office. It is what it is. Go back a 5th time. So it's trying to be resilient with that. Be ready for no, but, don't take it for an answer. So that's kind of, I think, what else do I need to, any other prompts there? We got it all done? There it is. Doug Smith, everybody.
He wants a war story.
A war story. I've got a couple war stories. War story. All right, one that jumps to mind. So, kind of ties it all in. So, there's a tenant out at I-20 West, actually, who really tough gatekeeper, but I knew that they needed space, and I had tracked that they have an expiration within, I think it was like 9 to 10 months at that point. And they were 70,000 feet, needed something in the neighborhood of 100 to 120, just talking with some people up front in the office. So I knew that decision maker was back there. So what a lot of times I would do is I would go around back to the dock doors in the back of the building and try and climb in a dock door and talk to someone who wasn't trained to be a gatekeeper. And, you know, sometimes that has worked for me in the past. I was like, this will work this time, no problem. Someone's going to be like, yeah, this is the guy. I'll walk you up front to the office. I have no idea what I'm doing. And that did happen, but I didn't know of anything at the time. The guy was like, get out of my office. I don't know what you're doing here, and, you know, left. Well, I came back probably a month later to try to do the same thing, but went front door and knocked on the door, and the CEO himself comes strutting out, and I was kind of floored, and I was like ready. I was like, hey, my name is John Gosnell. We're industrial real estate brokers. We help company. And in the middle, he's like, let me stop you right there. And he's like, that warehouse back there is a bonded warehouse. And so what that means is it's TSA. It hasn't been approved. It's from overseas. And so it's a secured area that you can't go in without a vest. And he's like, I have you on video going into a bonded, secured area, walking through that. I had to send 40 of my warehouse employees to a 4-week class to take extra training on why people shouldn't be in a bonded area at the warehouse. So, needless to say, did not get the business that time, but, you know, I'll be back probably in the next couple weeks, see if we can shake something loose there. So, with that, Mr. Doug Smith.
Tough to follow. Doug Smith, Seefried Properties. We're a national industrial development group. In Atlanta, we have a fairly robust leasing and property management group. Please do not tell Joseph Chris that I was referred to as the director of leasing. He is the director of leasing at Seefried. I'm just a senior vice president that kind of does a little bit of everything for the company. I've been around for a long time. I used to sit on that side of this table and think, oh my God, I hope one day I'm not one of those old farts up there talking about how he got in the business, but now I'm the old fart. So I moved to Atlanta in the mid-90s. I had a bunch of buddies from school that were in commercial real estate. I had zero plans for life. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my buddy, Scott Brown, said, why don't you go meet with my dad, Charlie Brown, who is a fairly prolific office developer in town. And Charlie said, look, why don't you go work at this company called Jameson, which was the predecessor to CoStar. And if you really want to get in commercial real estate, just go work and figure out what you like and what you want to do. And so I did that, and pretty quickly was drawn to the industrial side of the business. The people that I talked to on a regular basis just were very friendly and very open about what they did for a living. You know, I did everything I could do. If there was a commercial board event, I went to it. If there was you know, they used to have this thing called the Real Estate Softball League on Monday and Tuesday nights, and I'd go to every one of those games and bring my glove and my shoes and jump in and play with folks and get to know folks. And so it's all about networking and getting to know people. And then ran its course with Jameson. CoStar came, bought Jameson, and then I went to work for a company called MD Hodges. In fact, Victor Segrist is in the audience. My first day at Hodges, Mel Soros said, Doug, go get in the car with Victor. It was either Mel or Tom said, go get in the car with Victor and start learning. And so that's what I did. And so I worked at Hodges for a couple of years, and then I've been at Seefried now for, 21, 22 years. And so started out at Seefried doing, we only do landlord business at Seefried, so we don't do any tenant rep business. So, but I think that the idea of the prospecting and the grinding is generally the same for what we do and for what these guys do. I made a decision a long time ago that I wanted to be on the ownership side of the business for two main reasons. Number one, I really want to at some point, and we do at Seefried, own property and create an opportunity to create ownership through a business and ownership through real estate. And number two, I despise rejection. I hate it. And so to Gosnell's point and to Connor's point of knocking on doors 1,000 times and being told no 999 of those times is not inviting to me. It's just not my personality. So, and from a prospecting perspective, at Seefried, when I first started there, we had 2 or 3 institutional owners. One was A&B Property Group, which is now Prologis, and we had Cabot, and then we had Reef, and then we had some Seefried sponsored development that we leased. And then when A&B went in house, we lost that portfolio, which really kind of put us in a little bit of a stress point. And so at that point, Greg Heron and I, who still works at Seefried, we had to make a decision to go out and grow our business. And so we went out and prospected the institutional world. We got very fortunate with 2 or 3 institutional owners that were entering the Atlanta market for the first time, and we were introduced to them, and we became their boots on the ground in Atlanta, underwriting their assets that they were looking to buy and helping them to identify the pros and the cons of different assets and helping them with their acquisitions. And through that, they awarded us the leasing and typically the management of those assets when they closed on them. And then just through that, organically, we grew it through the different institutional owners. And, Joseph Chris in our office has done a great job of continuing that process. Right now, we currently represent, I think, 16 different institutional groups. I think our portfolio is plus or minus 20 or 22 million square feet. And so we've been very fortunate, and I give a lot of credit to the brokerage community. I know in a lot of markets, the brokerage community would sort of hold an issue against a company like Seefried that's also a developer for having third-party business. And I think that Seefried, because we've been doing it for so long, and I think we have great relationships with these guys, I don't think we sort of get that same gosh, y'all are doing development and you're doing leasing, and so hopefully we all kind of work together well. We love paying commissions. We love working with brokers. Atlanta is so blessed with an incredible brokerage group. Very smart, very diligent. They're having a hard time right now because the market's changing, and they're having to educate tenants on why they're going from paying $5 a foot to paying $9 a foot. But y'all are doing a great job, and we appreciate it. So, quick war story. When I first started at Seefried, Mr. Seefried owned 2 terrible, horrible buildings down by the airport on Hyannis Court, and they were very tough to lease. And his German partner in those buildings would literally would not spend a dime on these properties. And so we had one tenant that was interested in one of the spaces, and they were a vendor at the airport. And she came out and toured the space. We looked at it, sent her a proposal, and then she just wouldn't call me back. And so I finally, one Thursday morning, I literally went down to the airport. And this was before 9/11, where you kind of roam the airport without getting in trouble. And I literally sat outside of her office from about 10 o'clock in the morning until she left at the end of the day. And she finally invited me in, and we ended up getting the deal done. And then 6 months later, she's like, "This building sucks. I can't believe you made me go into this building." And I'm like, "Yes, it does, but thank you. You signed a 3-year lease, and there's nothing you can do about it." So anyway, that's what I've got.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for myself or any of the panelists?
Nothing about the outfit either.
All right. How has your prospecting evolved from, say, your first year in the business to, say, 3 or 4 years in the business to, say, it's had to have changed over the years. So walk us through sort of those 3 phases.
So, great question. First 1 or 2 years, it was 65 to 75 cold calls per day for me. If I wasn't cold calling, I was knocking on probably 30 to 40 doors per day. And then hopefully those calls and outreaches turn into tours, proposals, lease reviews, and actual deals. So that is time consuming and goes back to what Gosnell was saying, time management, golden hours. You got to set a certain amount of time per day to make those calls and knock on the doors. Yeah, so for the first 1 or 2 years, I'm 65, 75 calls per day. And then year 3 and 4, it dropped significantly for me. I got busy transacting on the deals, and to me, that's the toughest part about this business is transacting what you're currently working on so that you can actually make money while keeping the pipeline full for the months and years to come. I think year 3 and 4 probably trickle down to 30 to 40 calls per day. Maybe I'd miss a day here or there because I was out touring or drafting proposals or whatever. And today, 5, 6 years in, it's probably 20 a day, maybe if I'm lucky. And I need to get better at getting back to the roots of the business, which is dedicating. I think the most important thing is 1 to 2 hours per day, no matter what. You're dedicating to canvassing buildings, calling owners, calling tenants, doing something to kick up the next deal. And I think some of the older, more experienced brokers lose sight of that. He does a phenomenal job of that, and I think that's why he continues to be a top producer in Atlanta. And it's not easy to do, but yeah, I'll be the first to admit that I think my call volume has dropped over the years just as deal flow's picked up. But now as the market's kind of calmed down some, it's no secret that there's less sales in the market or less sale opportunities right now. So this is a perfect time to pick up the phone and go knock on doors and try to re-engage some of these owners.
If a building is owned by an LLC, do y'all have any secret tricks of finding the owner's phone numbers? You know, the days of the landlines are gone. Everybody's working off the cell phones. So, you see a building, maybe it's vacant, maybe there's a tenant that doesn't want to talk to you, but it's owned by 123 Main Street LLC. Is any big secrets of tracking down the phone number?
Yeah, we've got a team of researchers at our firm that can help us pull that information. Sometimes it's really tricky when there is an LLC; it's tough to get it. But I think it's LexisNexis is one of them. There's probably a couple others. But yeah, I'm notorious for flipping names and building addresses over to our research team, saying, "Hey, please dig up something for me, anything," just to try to get in the door. And sometimes it takes months or years to get into those people, but yeah, it's tough. Sometimes it does take the climbing through a dock door to figure out who owns the building, but talking to a general manager or somebody to get it, because sometimes it is pretty well hidden. Okay.
When making 60, 70 calls a day, how are you tracking your prospects? Is there a CRM that you prefer to use or a Excel spreadsheet?
Sure. I try to stay as far away from an Excel spreadsheet as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe the worst CRM system somebody could use just because it doesn't track what you need to. It's very tough to manage over a long period of time. I use ACT. A lot of you probably have heard of it. I kind of have a blended system, so I'm old school, so I have a paper calling list that's probably 90 to 100 pages for Fulton Industrial I-20 West. And it's listed in alphabetical order, and I literally drive every street, and whatever CoStar calling list or business-wise list missed, I'm going back and plugging in manually. Anybody that I meet or have a good conversation with goes immediately into ACT, which I can plug in the company name, the owner, or the decision maker, 2 or 3 different phone numbers, and an email. And then there's a note section that I get to plug in and talk about. So it's very bare bones. It's not a highly sophisticated CRM. But that's kind of my rule of thumb is anybody that I talk to or have a good conversation with, even if they just signed a lease, they go into that system, because for me I might not be the guy that repped them, but I could be the guy that hops in on the renewal in 5 years or 3 years from now. So my big thing is when they think of real estate, I need them to think of me. So, yeah.
Is that on your card? That's the bottom.
It should be. But it's, yeah, a
Stealing that, by the way.
little corny, but that is how I try to run the business is whatever I'm calling about, whatever I'm emailing about, whatever I'm writing to them in a letter needs to be geared towards them trying to keep that information handy. So if they ever think of it, I'm the guy to call. And the only problem is there's 8 other guys out there that are equally as talented as I am or much better that I'm competing with. So like you said, we're all collaborating each other for a deal. Okay.
When we're knocking on doors, I was told to bring something of value, like perhaps a consumer spending report or maybe a demographic report or something so it won't feel so random. Help me with the mechanics of what you're doing when you're knocking on doors.
I think it all just depends on the purpose of who you're calling and what service you're trying to provide. I mean, if you've got a few listings and you're trying to hit the pavement and get those buildings full, I would go out with a flyer for those properties. Of course, have a card handy. We do quarterly market newsletters and reports that we pass out. And then if you don't have any listings and you're trying to be a tenant rep and help these guys create leverage on a renewal or trying to relocate them, I have a little sheet that talks about the 10 benefits of having a broker represent you, or 10 things to think about when relocating. Or if they're calling on building owners one day, maybe there's a piece that you hand out that talks about the 5 reasons on why you should do a sell-leaseback, or 5 reasons, or 5 ways to get your building ready to sell. Something like that, just to get them turning. Because while your 60,000 square foot listing might not work for them, they might tell you they're looking for 100, 150. So you can kind of turn it into a tenant rep that way. But just some piece to talk about. And when I got started, I didn't really have any listings or anything. So it was a Lee & Associates market report and a card. And it was just an introduction, face-to-face, handshake meeting. Hey, Connor Winkler, I'm with Lee & Associates, help tenants make real estate decisions in West Atlanta. What's the situation with this current space? Is it working well? Is there a renewal coming up? And I would just try to get in that way. But it's and maybe I can tell this into my my parting thoughts. But it's you just got to implement a system and create a system for every single person or company that you're calling. So you have to learn how to integrate an email that's like a very personal, direct email, or an email campaign that you're doing to promote yourself and your brokerage business. Phone calling, in-person meetings, or door knocking, and writing letters. I think I found to be helpful. So whoever I meet, whoever I have a good call with, they get a handwritten letter. Thanks for your time on the phone. Look forward to staying in touch, and a follow-up email. And then I just tried to at least every 1 to 3 months ping them. Hey, how's it going? This building just sold. Hey, how's it going? This building just leased. Here's the comp. Wanted to let you know one of your competitors just did this. Just something to keep it, even if they don't have a need. Because the whole point is when they do, because they could sign a contract where they need an extra 50,000 feet in the area. And you never know when that's going to be, so you just got to always be top of mind somehow.
We'll talk about Tommy's question, how your prospecting is involved.
However many cold calls he said he made, I would make 10 more usually. I'm just kidding. But no, it's just a joke. But yes, mentally one a joke. But yeah, it's I think that's the whole game, right? Is balancing that, and as you get busy, it takes up your cold calling time, and so. Number one thing for me is I have no loved ones. I've got no girlfriend. I've got nobody to go home to. As soon as I found out he had a girlfriend, I was so fired up. I was like, you got to go home at a certain time. Like, I don't. So I was just in there just hitting it hard. No, but I think the main thing I'd say on that is it started out kind of being one of those where it was, as many calls as you can make in a day. I think I was less than you. I was probably about 50 a day, and that's a blend. It would be 100 touches in a day, but it would be like 50 probably calls. I'd try and balance that with some emails, which is a touch point to somebody, and I'd do probably 25 in person, try to be out there, just myself. And so it was trying to balance all of that stuff. As things kind of progressed, you have tours, you have space that you end up leasing that kind of are going to ultimately get in the way, and you have to do, right? But I think that going back to the Jeb Blunt book, I think it's you try and do all of that before 9 or after 5, so you're not in the middle of your cold call day. And again, those with families, jokes aside, like that's a tough ask. You have kids going to school, you've got a family you're eating dinner with at night. Like that's a tough ask. So I really just tried to capitalize on that as much as I could when I was younger to try and hit as many of those doors, and I wasn't losing cold call time due to the business that I'd procured through that. You're just trying to balance both those things as best as possible, and it's a tough game to play. Now you sometimes have to get on a plane for a tenant rep deal, and you're out of the market with some of your bigger accounts, and that takes up time. But trying to balance that is the whole name of the tenant rep game, whole name of the prospecting game is balancing the business you've procured through cold calling. I think another thing, just kind of piggybacking off that, is you can really, it really can kind of get mentally, you kind of got to watch how that trickles over into your personal life a little bit. I had my parents on vacation, sleeping and shaking me awake, and I was like, 775 triple net, like stuff like that. It just was like, it becomes all you think about, and it really does kind of like, it's kind of like, whoa. But at some point, you got to be able to turn that off at a certain point of the day, and it's a work-life balance, because those, I'm sure most people in here, you're in this business because you're competitive just by nature, and that's kind of what, is a good thing, but it can also be kind of one of those where it trickles a little bit much into kind of what you're doing with loved ones. So that's just kind of the key. Doug sitting there like, what are you talking about? But yeah, that was a kind of a thing to throttle back as you get older. Is you're starting out kind of voraciously cold calling, and I think that you need to be able to turn that off at some point and be able to kind of go find some other stuff to do. So, any questions? Mason.
You guys mentioned a lot of direct outreach, such as like phone calls, trying to direct to the decision maker, emails. Do y'all ever go to like conferences for specific sectors that maybe are a little bit more, I guess, aggressive leasing space, or like the YCR golf tournament, how people set up booths and whatnot? Do y'all do any sort of indirect where you're just possibly with a lot of different sort of decision makers or people or whatnot?
I've got one really good one that I'm not going to share the name of because I don't want to see either of you out there. But yes, and it's that's been a really big thing for me, and sponsoring that, and it turns into just prospecting. I'm like, I know you because I've cold called you 10 times, and now you're standing here in front of me, and I've got all the time in the world with you. So yes, there's a couple things that I've tried to just find through various outlets, or people saying, hey, I'm a part of this group, you should come do this with me, on people that are friendly to me, that definitely jump at every opportunity for that. If it's something in the industry or kind of a bigger business that someone throws at you, it's kind of like an opportunity to, someone's cracking the door for you like that, throw it open, go join a bigger part of a group of, what a lot of those tenants are already a part of. Whatever asset class you might be a part of. So Urban Land Institute, if you want to get some better, brokerage relationships, that's a really good one to join. But yes, any kind of group that a lot of these tenants are part of, and there's some that they all kind of group together and do if they're in the same industry, that's super important and is a kind of an easy way to get in front of those guys where cold calling may not, produce the same results. Anybody else?
I know that I know back in the day when we represented a lot of the stuff down by the airport, I think Tommy would do this as well. They had this, the Air Cargo Association had this golf tournament, and it was a drunk fest. And so we would always either play in it or we would sponsor something. And you could occasionally get a picture or two of some of these tenants that doing stuff that they probably shouldn't have been doing, and you could go call them the next week and remind them of what they've done at the golf tournament. But yeah, there's certainly from an ownership perspective, we do that all the time. We go to NAIOP stuff where there's lots of institutional owners around and different things. I would say. One thing obviously we're not doing the same thing as these guys and a lot of y'all are doing, but I think the basis for a lot of y'all's business and our business is you got to know your market. I mean, you got to know it cold. And so when these guys are out cold calling and they get the guy and he says, okay, tell me the 3 buildings within 1 mile of me that's available because I need 50,000 square feet next week, you got to know it. You can't say, let me call you back. Let me go run my CoStar report and call you back. You got to know it. And so, when I was at Jameson, I spent most of that time with guys like Joseph Rogers and Bill Doran, understanding the market, knowing the buildings, knowing the tenants, knowing the streets, and just getting very granular in your market. And I think that is key for everybody. And that's when an institutional owner calls us, and he's looking at a building in Griffin, Georgia. We know what's going on in Griffin just because we've been down there and we've kind of looked around, and you just got to know your market's really cold and just get deep in your markets and kind of to John's point, find, economic development folks, get to know them, go if they have different groups, Fulton Industrial CID, go to those meetings. I mean, it's just, there's plenty of things that you can do in your market to get deeper and make sure you get to know the people, and you'll run into people and create relationships. But to me, the basis of all of this is, go work your market, but you need to be the market expert in your market. And so know the deals, know the tenants, know the buildings, to your point about an owner, if you know your market, you'll know who that owner is. So.
Alrighty, well, I'll give some parting thoughts if y'all want to as well. To kind of circle back is to Tommy's question. So like I said, I'm 2 years in the business, so kind of at the tail end of Connor's 60 to 75 cold calls a day time frame. And so, but I'm finally at the point now where it's like, okay, it's no longer, we're in the office at 7:30, and then at 9 a.m. we're at some business park in Kennesaw, and we're going to stay up there till 5, and then we're going to stay till 7 or whatever, logging my calls and put it into my database. It's now, okay, I've got a tour at 10 in Alpharetta, then I got another one at 2 in Marietta, and okay, what the heck am I going to do to try to win some business between those two? And so I think an effective way to do that is to, especially if you're comfortable and enjoy cold calling in person, is to say, okay, I've got a tour at 10. I'm going to get up there at 8:30 or 9, go hit 10 doors around it, go do my tour, and then go on to the next one. So it's a way, if you can figure out, I use an app called Evernote where if I'm talking to folks, I'll write everything down after every conversation I have, and then I can pull that up on my computer when I'm back in my office and get it into my database. And so that's a way for me to kind of efficiently and while I'm still doing the transaction side of the business, continue to grow the prospecting side, while you're still doing the activities that eventually make you the money. And so that, and then as far as databases go, I use Pipedrive. A lot of guys in our office use Pipedrive. It's simple. I'm not a techie person whatsoever. And so it's easy, and it tells me what I need to do. So, when we go ping somebody and want to call them a month or two later, it sends me a notification, hey, you need to call this guy, which otherwise, 60 days after I called him last time would have no idea, that I need to talk to that person. And so, final thoughts. I think Doug touched on this, but the real estate community in Atlanta is awesome. I'm from here originally, but wasn't really, neither my parents or family was in real estate, and so wasn't really familiar with any particular person in the industry and kind of figured out a way to get my foot in the door. And since then, was still intimidated to go call folks to grab lunch when I first started. And it's been amazing to see how friendly and welcoming everyone is. So my kind of parting recommendation is if you're having a tough time cold calling, prospecting, it's not working, it's getting stale, ask someone to go grab lunch who you see is doing deals or has a lot of listings or is appear to be successful. And I think you'll find that if you're hardworking and personable and are out there trying to grind, that they'll take the time to meet with you and share their wisdom with you, because that's something that I've frankly been pleasantly surprised to see in my short time in the business. So with that, thank you to all y'all for coming, and thank you to our wonderful panelists here for sharing their wisdom, and look forward to seeing y'all out there.